Hello, everyone. I am Natasha Nuytten, CEO at Clara and host of Human Side Up. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode with you. We're going to talk with Matt Watson, who is a serial entrepreneur and the CEO of Full Scale, about the job of a leader, not being about doing all of the things or being the hero in the center of the story, but really about how to amplify the brilliance around you. And I love that. Matt has experienced two major exits. VinSolutions, which he sold to Cox Automotive for $150 million, his first company. And then just this past December, he completed a strategic buyout of his co-founder at Full Scale. He sees his job there as simply to find more cool companies for our 300 developers to work with. I love that. It's really a fundamental reimagining of what leadership could look like and maybe should look like. Anyway, but there's more to Matt. He is Kansas City born and is building a bridge between tech companies in the US and top tier talent in the Philippines. His heart is in the Philippines, and he'll share with you why. And you'll see that he's really passionate about creating opportunity for the people in that nation. Right now, Full Scale is growing. They moved from 100 to 300 developers, and they have plans in the next year to hit 500 developers. It's amazing. They're doing big things. But because it isn't just about offshore development, it's about rewriting the rules about how we think about talent, geography, and opportunity. Full Scale is really successful because they have rethought and been very intentional about creating psychological safety and the environment for ownership and healthy friction. I'm really excited for you to learn from Matt and for him to share a little bit about his story and his superpowers. So let's dive in. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today on Human Side Up. I appreciate your time. And we both happen to be in the Midwest. I'm in Omaha. You maybe aren't in the Midwest now, but I know you are a Midwest kid. So I'm not sure what time of the day it is for you where you are.
I'm in Kansas City.
Oh, right
on. A couple
on.
hours away.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, Kansas City, great barbecue. Drive through it when I go visit my in-laws in Missouri. So yay for the Midwest, Silicon Prairie, right?
That's right.
All right, quick question for you. We start with our podcast this way with everybody so we can get to know a little bit about you. And that question is, what are 2 or 3 words about you that you would use to describe yourself that we may or may not see on your CV or your resume that have been, sort of core to who you are and how you've ended up as this version of Matt? And then when did you start to own them about yourself as true?
I think if I had to describe myself in just a couple words, I would probably say like problem solver, obsessed, ADHD. I think those are the words I would use.
I love that. And, in fact, I'm going to ask you a little bit about that. I would almost say that the obsession about problem solving that ADHD folks often have, like that's the superpower, right? The other side of that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's also a giant weakness.
Yeah.
And then you have kids with ADHD, so it's a lot of fun.
Everybody all over the place. So when did you start to know those things as true about yourself and leverage them for good instead of evil?
I've always had this tendency of I work with a really high sense of urgency, like a really high motor. I grew up like working really hard, even as a kid, helping with my dad at flea markets and stuff. So at a very early age, I was like really a hard worker, and working was never a problem for me. Very motivated, very self-driven, and I work with a super high sense of urgency, like all day long. I just work with a super high sense of urgency, which I've come to learn is not normal for other people, especially my wife. I love her if she hears this, but she's on the other end of the spectrum, and I just deal with just have a very high motor. And I didn't realize, though, that I had ADHD really till I was closer to 40 years old. I'm finally self-diagnosing myself with this because I watch too many TikTok videos like a lot of other people. But if I tell other people, I'm like, oh, I think I have ADHD, they all look at me like I'm stupid. They're like, you didn't know this? I'm like, no. But it took me to 40 to fully embrace the fact of this. And then, now when I look back, different things they do, different behaviors, different things, I'm just much more self-aware. And so now I make different decisions in life on a daily basis, knowing just how I am and being more realistic about things.
Yeah.
But
I think that's really smart. There's also language for it now, right? Like I remember I'm a little older than you. I'm almost 50. And when kids in my class who I look back now and I'm like, oh, for sure that kiddo had ADHD, like no question about it. They didn't have language or rules for it. It was just like a kid who couldn't sit still or was daydreaming out the window or whatever. So it's nice to have the ability to sort of talk about it in a different way now than we used to. So I can appreciate that. That's good. What do you do differently?
A good example of this is my wife asked me the other day, she's like, hey, when the kids bring home their backpacks, you're supposed to go through their folders and their homework. And she's like, are you going to do that every day? And well, before I would have said yes. I'm like, oh yeah, of course I'll do that. Now I'm like, nope, I know I'm not going to do it.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. I don't care about doing that. It's not of interest of me. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
And like now when I get an email or something, I'm like, I know if I don't respond to this email right now, I never will. Like, I just know this about myself where I just think just the way I operate, it's learning how you operate.
Yeah.
So, and being self-aware and realistic about it, I think is the challenge.
Yeah.
Most people are never self-aware.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And there's awareness, and then we talk about something in our company. I'd love to see how this lands with you, where there's the awareness of the thing, and then there's also owning how that plays out, how that impacts other people. What can I do differently? What can't I do differently? What do I need sort of in relationship with the people in my world, to check the homework in the backpack. Like, how are we gonna get that done collectively? So I think that's good insight. Self-awareness is good. So thank you for sharing that.
So some of it's delegation, your point, right? It's like, okay, I know I'm not going to go through the backpack. So I'm like, I have to ask my wife, it's like, you're going to have to do this. Like, I know I'm not going to do this. Like, I just know. And so in work, it's the same thing. It's knowing what to delegate, what to give to somebody else. Like, I know I'm not going to do this thing. I'm not the best person to do this thing. Who can I trust to, own this thing instead? And so over time, learning more and more about that. I think there's another side to ADHD, though, that I think was the superpowers, if you want to talk more about it. But
yeah, I do.
So I think when you have ADHD, at least, and ADHD is a spectrum, right? And there's people that are on the non-attentive side and the people on the hyper-attentive side, and people all over the spectrum of this. My wife actually has ADHD and she's on the non-attentive side. So she could like literally sit and do nothing all day and be totally happy.
Yeah.
Where I'm on the more hyper side, whereas like I always have to be doing something. I can't sit still. I got to be doing something. But her and I both share the same trait where we hyper focus. It's like we find something that we want to do and then we really hyper focus on whatever the thing is. And it's super difficult to get us away from whatever that thing is, because that's the only thing my brain can think about is the thing.
Yeah.
So like when I wrote a book called Product Driven, and when I was writing the book, that's like all I did for like 4 months. If it wasn't that, it was like dead to me. I just didn't do it because I was so hyper focused on it. The good news is, from a leadership and a business perspective, if you give me a hard problem to solve, I'm like a dog on a bone. Like, I'm not giving it up. I'm going to solve this problem. Nothing will prevent me from stopping this problem. And I will relentlessly work on it until I figure it out, which is kind of a superpower.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, nothing is going to distract me away from that goal if it really captures my interest, right? Which is a really unique skill. Has all the weird downsides and negatives to it as well. Because I can get lost somewhere. It's like, Matt, I need your help with this thing. Too busy, gnawing on the bone, right? Like, there's negatives to it as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's a superpower. Have you heard that before?
Totally. Yeah, totally. That is exactly along the lines of what I was thinking when I was talking about there being some superpowers in having ADHD. It is absolutely an opportunity to connect dots that other people don't see.
Yeah.
You can get super vigilant about something, as you said, hyper focused on a thing, and plus and minus, right, on both of those things. But the reality is, like, there are ways, when you know that about yourself, there are ways to sort of leverage that into doing amazing work, leading teams in a particular way, building product, doing those types of things. So yeah, I love it. I think that's absolutely true.
I have one more for you that I think goes along with this, and I don't know if this one gets as much attention. So I have I have 5 kids, but at least 2 or 3 of them have ADHD,
Okay.
both types. And my oldest, I've always struggled with. He's 16. It doesn't matter what I do, however you try to punish him, or he doesn't do something the right way or whatever, from a parenting perspective, he doesn't care about any consequences. No consequences at all will faze him. He just does not care. And what I figured out about myself as I went through this self-awareness journey, I don't either. Consequences do not bother me or scare me in any way. And that might be part of what makes me a crazy / good entrepreneur. Risk doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
I have not scared of any consequences. I'm not scared to make decisions quickly and try things and learn things. I'm just not scared of any of the consequences.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try whatever needs to be tried and do whatever needs to be done, and just figure it out as I go. Like, I'm not scared of anything. And then there are other people, my wife is on this side, where she tends to be scared of everything. Like, she doesn't want to take risks. She's scared of the unknown. And I am just like 1,000% opposite on the other end.
Yeah. No,
so her and I balance each other out.
That's great. It's the yin and the yang, right? Like the two sides or yang. If you're, I don't know, sometimes you get corrected, and then I'm told it's like saying Valencia versus Valencia. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about? No.
As long as we understand
Anyway,
each other, that's all that matters.
Anyway, so I think what's interesting about what you just shared is that I do think that there's balance, right? And I think every leader needs to have a little bit of both of those sides of the thing, right? Being able to harness the thing and having the awareness of that. So talk to me a little bit about, you've had quite a journey as an entrepreneur, and give us a little bit of history for people who don't know you and how you've landed in this place where you are now. Give us a little bit of the history of Matt Watson.
Well, today I'm 44, but my entrepreneur journey started when I was 22.
Okay.
So I started my first company when I was 22. And it was honestly not my business idea. Somebody else had an idea, actually had a need. They were going around taking pictures of cars for car dealerships and needed to upload those pictures to autotrader.com, cars.com, eBay, stuff like that. And needed some software to help do that and make it easier to do. And I just sat down with that other guy at Applebee's. He explained what he wanted to do. And I'm just like, yeah, sure. Oh, I can help you do that. Again, no consequences. I'm just the opportunity guy, the problem solving guy. And we built that software. And then over time, we never raised any capital. We just bootstrapped it the whole way. Eventually, it turned into a CRM type product like Salesforce and HubSpot, stuff like that, but designed for car dealers. And today it is still the #1 CRM product on the market for car dealers. And we sold that in 2011, but here we are like 15 years later, it's still rolling.
Yeah.
They haven't changed the software in 15 years, so it's probably ready to be disrupted. But, yeah, that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. And again, I was 22. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm going to refer to myself as the kid who liked to write code and solve problems and talk to people and understand their needs and be the dog on the bone, solving problems, building cool stuff. Like, I just built a business, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know what a startup was.
Right. But you know what? I think to your point about not having fear of consequences or them really like weighing in your decision-making process. I think more people, what would you do if you didn't? What could you get done if you weren't worried about failing, right? And
you didn't talk yourself out of it.
Yeah, exactly. 100% agree with that. I think I was an intrapreneur for a long time and wasn't any kind of preneur for the first part of my career, and then sort of transitioned and ended up building a few things because I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, okay, like that's life. That's where your growth edge is, right? When you're constantly doing a new thing. So I really appreciate that. So now that you've landed after you left there and sold the company and exited, congratulations, by the way, exiting a company is not common. So good for you. Landing in this new place and doing this new thing. How did you end up working with Matt, your former, well, I guess technically he's still your co-founder, and former business partner, in Full Scale?
Yeah. So over this time period, I've started 4 different companies and sold 3 of them. So after VinSolutions, which was the automotive company we were talking about, CRM company, I started a company called Stackify. And I went from being the CTO of VinSolutions and having, other business partner. And I mean, at that point we had like 300 employees and it was a big business, to starting Stackify and deciding like, I'm going to do this all on my own. I want no business partners. I'm going to be the CEO. I'm going to figure all this out. And boy, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I sure learned a lot. And that's the only way you're going to learn. That's the best education.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I became the CEO of Stackify and figured all that out. And that was a lot of hard lessons. But along the way during the Stackify journey, I needed to hire about 10 software developers here in Kansas City. And this was like 2017 or so. And at that time, they were very difficult to find, very expensive. I had lost 3 of my key employees at Stackify. They got recruited away to literally go work at Amazon, Microsoft, and Garmin. Stole 3 of my top employees. And I'm like, you know what? For the same cost of those 3 people, I can hire 10 people in the Philippines. And my friend at that time, Matt DeCourcy, which I think you kind of alluded to, had already had a handful of employees in the Philippines. And so he convinced me to give it a try. I'd had experience before working with software developers in Russia and Latin America and different places, and generally had good success. And so, yeah, we ended up creating that like little partnerships. Like, hey, I'll hire my 10 people. You already have 5 people or whatever. We'll just create a little partnership, and maybe somebody else could use this service. Maybe we could hire some other people. And then we hired 100 people in the next 12 months. It was the fastest growing, craziest business I ever worked on. There was an accidental business.
Yeah.
And so that's full scale. That's what full scale is turned into today.
Nice.
So
Nice. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the transition from CTO to CEO, from, co-founder to solopreneur to back co-founder. That's a journey I'm very interested in. But I'm really curious about, the tech industry sort of has a complicated relationship with offshore development sometimes, right? And there's questions around sort of, is it exploitation? Is it, salvation of the industry? Like, there's a lot happening there, right? And I'm also from the Midwest. We're sort of outsiders in and of ourselves in that world. I'm curious though, like, as a sort of, I guess technically, can I call you middle-aged at this point when you're 44? You're a little younger than me. You're sort of this middle-aged white guy with, from Kansas. And I'm curious, like, how you navigate that tension with the responsibility to sort of lead in that space where we're talking about offshore versus nearshore versus, domestic development. What is that world and that conversation like for you these days?
well, our goal is just to find the best talent we can find in the Philippines. And I have over 300 employees that work for me there now. And, we create super amazing high paying jobs for them. Like senior level software engineers in the Philippines make more than a doctor or a lawyer does in the Philippines. So when people say it's exploitation, I just almost kind of laugh at them. I'm like, these are super, super high paying jobs. Like, and you don't realize like every one of these people we hire, they really then create like 2 or 3 more jobs, right? Because of all the money they go spend in the local economy. So it's like, we have over 300 employees there, but we probably create over 1,000 jobs in this country. And they're super high paying jobs. And these people are super happy to have these opportunities. I mean, I think you understand, like everybody in life just wants an opportunity. They need an opportunity to start their career, to grow, to succeed, and do all these things. And, I look at it like we're creating opportunities for them and, creating great opportunities for them. And, we've worked with over 200 clients in the United States that have used our talent from the Philippines. And we have over 70 or so today, including some publicly traded companies, companies and brands that you would know, all the way down to a lot of startups and companies that were in between. But, our goal is just trying to help those local companies that need affordable talent be able to access that talent. And honestly, a lot of those companies would never be able to hire the talent locally. Like it's totally out of their budget. Like they wouldn't hire anybody. So it's like, for some of them, it's like the businesses wouldn't exist or the jobs wouldn't even exist here anyways, because they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
Just like if you're like, I need to hire somebody to produce my podcast. I'm like, you're not going to spend $7,000 a month or something to hire that person to produce a podcast, but you're like, oh, I found somebody on Upwork that'll do it for $500 or whatever.
Sure.
Like, okay, yeah, now I'll do it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's just an affordability thing that comes into it.
Yeah. You've used the language, or I've heard you use the language. You haven't done it yet today, but thoughtful offshoring, right? Versus cost cutting. And I'm curious because there is a very there's a business impact, but there's also a very human impact when we get it wrong, right? On both sides of the equation. And so I'm really curious how you would talk about the difference and why leaders should really care about getting that right if they're doing that kind of development offshore, and what happens when we stop seeing it as just a business strategy and we really start thinking about it as an opportunity to build bridges. What does that open up?
Yeah, I think another way I would think about this is it's a problem with software engineering in general. So even locally here, a lot of big companies, software engineers are kind of treated like cogs in the machine. It's like an assembly line. It's like the product team, the leadership team, writes the requirements, what software needs to be built. It gets handed over to the software engineering team, and they hide in the basement somewhere in their cubicles, and they write all the code and then hand it off, and then we ship the code. And software engineers kind of get treated, somebody described them as mushrooms in the basement. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, the innovation and problem solving and product, instincts and stuff that a lot of, highly creative software engineers have gets totally stifled and lost. And so to answer your question, these big companies that treat software engineers like it's an assembly line and like they're cogs in the machine only care about what seems to be the least expensive. They're like, okay, where can I find the least expensive cog in the machine? And then those companies also don't innovate. Innovation dies because they have set up their entire companies the wrong way and building this assembly line. Just like my old company from 15 years ago, the product does less than it did today. They removed functionality and the user experience, everything looks the same. Like they have not innovated in 15 years, but they've spent over $100 million on R&D. Just maintaining status quo, right? And so that's what happens in these big companies. And yeah, for them, they're like, oh, if we're just going to maintain status quo, I guess let's hire the cheapest possible person we can find to maintain this status quo. Versus if you're looking at it from a investment and innovation perspective, the quality of the talent matters a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like I need highly creative people that are focused on outcomes and building a product that people are going to use, a product that people are going to care about, right? Like, and that's important. Doesn't matter where you hire people, is looking at from the perspective of we're trying to build cool stuff, and I need to find highly innovative people that have good collaboration skills, good communication skills that can work with me to go build this cool thing. Instead of like, I just need to find the cheapest person in the world to like do this task and I don't care.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I want to dive into that just a little bit. So you mentioned earlier you're writing a book, and I would love to talk about that because part of the notion of your book is really about that sort of how do we help get out of the way, right? And let people have ownership of their work and be more creative in problem solving. So talk to us a little bit about how you are implementing that. And very frankly, I'm interested in the concept as a whole in and of itself. And then you're doing this cross-culturally, right? Where you're trying to bring two teams together. So I'd love to kind of weave those things together and get your take on that.
So a year ago, I had the idea of writing a book, and the key concept of it was what we kind of just talked about. It's like the best software engineers that worked for us were the ones who ask the most questions, they collaborate, they communicate, they speak up, they think outside the code, right? The ones that struggle are the ones that just say yes and they don't collaborate as much. They just do what they're told. They never push back. And honestly, a lot of them just don't care. They just don't care. They're just doing their job and they don't care. But what we need is to figure out, okay, how do we get more of the team to understand the big picture? Why are we doing this? Understanding how it impacts the problem, the customer, the business, this kind of higher level thinking, right? And that's what inspired me to write the book, Product Driven, which came out in July of this year, was a bestseller when it launched. And what was interesting to me is I ended up writing a book about leadership and culture, which if you would have asked me how important culture was like a year ago, I would have said not. Like I'm such the opposite of a culture guy. That just seems like weird to me to think about. But I ended up writing a book about culture, and about if you want to scale an engineering team or really any kind of team, right? It comes down to creating ownership in the team. The team has to take ownership of the work. And so my book is about how to do that in the context of software engineering. But a lot of the principles are the same across any kind of discipline. My director of marketing kept telling me all the time, she's like, man, I'm learning so much from your book that just applies even to our marketing team.
Sure.
So it was really cool. But
yeah, I think that's absolutely true. What are a few of the things that maybe you knew coming in that you're like, and again, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but in my experience, there are some things that people do that are sort of innate to them that seem very obvious, right? And it's just how they think. And then there are other things that we learn along the way that we've incorporated. And I'm kind of curious, as you've developed this philosophy and this sort of way of working in your organization, which were the things that were innate to who you are and how you already work, and which were the things that you had to learn the hard way because you didn't get them right out of the gate?
yeah, I think for me, you mentioned that the key that I think a lot of people like me have, it's like we wake up every day, we just are the way we are, we're wired the way we are, and we're successful, I guess, because of the way we are. But that doesn't mean we can explain it. That doesn't mean we could tell somebody else how to do it. Just like somebody who can go hit home run after home run doesn't mean they can explain to somebody else like how to hit a home run, right? It's like, I don't know, I just do this. This is what I do. I'm wired this way. And what was interesting for me about writing the book is it made me really step back and think deeply and self-reflect on how I worked and some of the things that I did. And what I ended up doing in the book is creating what I called the product-driven model. So when I was writing the book, I kept talking about things like ownership and trusting the team and focusing on the right things and different concepts like this. And I kept repeating those same themes. I'm like, you know what? I could kind of create a model out of this and say, okay, these are the 5 keys to this kind of leadership style. And so that's what I ended up doing, is creating this model. And then when I built it around the model, it just really forced me to think really deeply about each of those components and then how to explain that to other people and how to teach other people about each of those components. So to me, one of the best things about writing the book was that really deep self-reflection and self-learning about like, this is kind of how I've done things for a long time. And now I can vocalize them in a different way to explain to somebody else that before I probably couldn't have done.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. There's this concept, I'm not sure if you are familiar with it. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something, I came across it. And it was like sort of an operator's manual for leaders, like being able to understand how you function, sort of like a help me help you kind of thing. And it sounds to me as if writing this book was a little bit of that. Like, here's how I'm thinking. Here's how this is working. And it's not so much about like them helping you, but helping you be able to articulate the expectations in the company. For like, this is how we're going to build. This is how I expect our relationship to work, and how I'm going to create the environment for you to be what I need you to be for us to be successful together. Is that a fair sort of interpretation of that?
I think one of the things we don't do enough as a leader is have some of those frank conversations about how we work together and kind of expectations. Most people that work around me, especially when they work around me at first, I'm kind of probably I'm probably a little intense and over intimidating to people because I move fast. I'm very opinionated. I'm very bold. And you mentioned earlier culture, like some people from different cultures are very indirect. Like there are some cultures around this world where they will not tell you what they think at all. They never will. And they're not direct people. And, you know, even some Americans can be this way. We have different language communication styles, but I'm very direct, very to the point. But a lot of times, like, I'm just trying to get things accomplished. And so, yeah, now it's like, I feel like I have to tell people about, okay, this is how I am. Don't get offended by this. It's just the way I am. Doesn't mean I'm like mad at you. It just means I'm trying to get stuff done. And I'm very to the point, and I want to win.
Yeah.
I want to go win. And this is how we're going to do it. And I think sometimes, yeah, it's taking that a little bit of time to like understand, like, this is how we work together, and don't get offended when I do this. And a good example of this, we were hiring an executive assistant, and I was telling her, I'm like, your job is going to be to chase me around every day and tell me what to do and remind me to do stuff that I'm going to keep ignoring to do. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, like, this is not going to work. That's literally your job. I expect you to be annoying to me.
I love
It's
that.
just very frank,
Yes.
right? It's like, it's what I expect.
Yes. I love that. I have the same conversation. I've been very fortunate to work with my EA in 2 companies now. And she was the first phone call that I made when I was like, okay, I need to bring someone in to work with me. And I was like, it has to be her because she speaks my language. I don't have to say the things 7 times, like, because I operate a little bit like you in that I'm a Clydesdale. I am half Belgian and I come by it naturally. I will work until the thing is done and I will keep going and I will keep going. I don't have the sort of hyper focus in the same exact way that you do, I don't think, but like I can 16-hour days or that's like that's just how I function, right? Because that's what needs to be done right now. And
Yeah.
so I can appreciate that. And I also have a sort of tendency of like, I've said a thing. And for me, if I've said it out loud, I'm saying it out loud because it needs to be heard and I need you to hear it. But that's not the case with everybody else. And so she's excellent at reminding me, like, just because you said it one time doesn't mean that everybody is taking the same value around the thing or putting the same importance on it that you've
Yeah.
put on it. And so it's really awesome to know that about yourself and to have those people around you who can remind you that, like, listen, you're really focused on yourself right now. You need to like walk through the world with a little more awareness of how the other people around you are responding to what you're doing, or or make the adjustment of
Well,
expectation on what is happening.
Well, and I would say one of the hardest challenges of being a leader and probably even more so a startup founder or like very product driven person is you may have in your head the vision for like how this product is supposed to work or how you want to accomplish anything, right? And it seems so obvious to you and so intuitive to you, but it's so difficult to get that out of your head and explain it to somebody else and get very frustrated with them. You're like, why don't you just understand the same thing that I do? You don't see this the same way that I do. It's like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
That was my 20s. I wasn't very nice to people. Probably in my 20s as I would be now. But it's coming to that reality is like, the hard part is getting it out of my head and vocalizing it and explaining these things to other people and continuing to remind them, like, this is what's important. This is why we're doing this. And like, keep beating that drum. That's one of the things I talk about in my book is like, everything starts with the vision of like, why are we doing this thing? And it's not some HR BS, thing you write on the wall. It's like, why are we doing this thing today? This thing. Why this thing? Why does this thing matter?
Yeah.
So that people understand, like, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Instead of, I don't know, she just told me to do this thing and I'm just doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Completely agree. And I think it is incumbent upon, and I think most leaders would agree, but we don't always do it well. It's incumbent upon us as the leader in the room to be the person who is making sure that you're communicating clearly, right? I often say clear is kind. And that's for me as much as it is for everybody else. Like, if I have not been clear, and not only if I've not been clear that I think I've been clear, but if you are not clear about what I have said and we're not in agreement about the thing that's in front of us, then that's just hard for everybody, right? So clear as kind is something that we talk a lot about. And it's my responsibility, right? It's your responsibility to be the person who has communicated that out to the team. So I'm curious in thinking about, because you do work across cultures and you are bringing different teams together. Kansas City has its own special sauce, and it's intentional that I'm using that word, given Jones Barbecue and all the other barbecue in Kansas City. It's got its own unique flavor, and so does the Philippines, and in particular the city in which you're working. So how do you help bridge those things? And I know you're not a culture guy, but clearly you've had to become a culture guy to be so successful.
I've had to become one.
How have you made that transition? And what are maybe 2 or 3 of the things that you think about every day as a team or as a leader that you bring into your team to make sure that those groups of people can work together well?
Well, so my wife is Filipino. So I'm married. From going to the Philippines and the whole full scale adventure over the last 7 years or so, I fell in love with the people over there, honestly some of the nicest people in the world, and fell in love with the people. And was like, I want to marry one of these ladies. I met my wife over there, and she moved back to the U.S. and she's a U.S. citizen now, and we have a couple kids and all that stuff. So I'm deep ingrained in the culture. I live it every day.
Sure.
And now she's a sample of one, right, out of 150 million people, or whatever. But what's interesting after having hundreds of employees there and my wife and even kids, some of the deep ingrained culture things are interesting to pick up and understand. Like you mentioned earlier, like, oh, I'm half Belgium or whatever. And like, could be things that you pick up too. You're like, okay, I see how this is like a common trait or whatever, common in the culture. And what's interesting is some of it is like, it's in the DNA too. It's not even just a like culture, like nurture thing. Like some of it is in the DNA, which is fascinating to me, or at least that's the way it seems. Because I have, kids now too. But some of the biggest things that I see is it's the communication style stuff. They're raised in a culture, I think, that is not as risk tolerant. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't really want to take a lot of risk. And the communication style is different. They're less likely to tell. They're not very direct about how they feel about things, especially if it's negative or bad. And they don't want to embarrass other people. They don't want to disrespect other people. So they're less likely to say something disrespectful of their boss. Like everybody will call me sir and stuff like that, or is less likely to be completely transparent or truthful to me, because I'm like, oh, I'm the big scary boss, and you don't do that to the big scary boss. It's like, to some degree, I feel like they're too nice to each other. I don't know how else to describe it, which can hold them back, right? It's like the only way you make progress at times is to challenge each other, criticize each other, learn, grow, right? And to some degree, I think sometimes they can be too nice to each other, which can, I think, stifle that a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's a very broad spectrum of, to paint a whole country, but some of those kind of culture things, you definitely see in like the vast majority of people. So it's just interesting, when you're dealing with a whole country and the whole culture, and you just see a lot of similarities, a lot of stereotypes. It's just interesting.
Yeah. So how do you address that resistance to friction in your company?
Yeah. It's training. We try and train them of like, it's part of your job as a professional, right? To speak up, to have ideas, to push back, to bring ideas. It's like, maybe you wouldn't do that to your mom or your grandma in a personal setting. It's like, I get it. But in a professional setting, like, if you know something's a bad idea or it's going to fail, like, you need to speak up. Say like, hey, I don't think, thanks for the suggestion, whatever, blah, 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 but I don't think it's going to work for these ideas. Maybe we should consider this, right? Like they've at a professional level, they've got to do this kind of stuff. And so maybe they wouldn't in their personal lives. They don't want to rock the boat with family or friends or whatever. But yeah, in a professional setting, it's more important. So we train on these sort of things, and we understand that about our employees and how we manage them. Maybe we at least have certain expectations of maybe how they're going to receive things or how they'll interact with us. And so just understanding the culture of who you're dealing with,
I think that's really important. And I'm curious, as you relate that to ownership, right? So you've given us a little bit like, and I don't know, like if you understand that the fact that you all train that, recognizing that is a real hurdle potentially, right? And training it, like that's really important. And again, I think this might be one of those things where like, yeah, I mean, that's just what we do. Like you've thought about it already. And, but there are a lot of companies that don't spend the time to do that. And so I think it's important for people to hear. So thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate that you're making it so important of a point, being intentional about it. How do you then, you talk a lot about ownership and you want your team to feel like they get the why, they understand what the point of the thing is. How do you help ingrain that in a culture where there tends to be deference, right, to the other person? And maybe I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, I have an opinion about this thing, and I understand what my contribution is to making it really important.
So we always knew this is important. We always knew when it comes to software development, collaboration is key, communication is key. All this stuff is really important. but we struggled for a long time for how to describe it, and how to train around it and name the problem. Like, how do you name the problem and solve the problem? And then a year ago, one of my colleagues or one of our employees in the Philippines actually met with me one day. He's like, yeah, we had the same problem at NCR, which is a National Cash Register. Like, you go to Walmart or something and check out, like, that's NCR. But he's like, yeah, we what we called this after years of research, of managing all of our staff in the Philippines, whatever. This was the thing that we learned was the most important of all. And this is what we called it. And it was courage. And so what they ended up doing is kind of rethinking around some of this training, and the problem and the thing to improve was this idea of courage. Like, how do I go and inspire courage in the team to speak up? How do I give them the courage? Do they have the courage to speak up, to push back, to ask questions, to bring ideas? Do they have the courage to do that? And when he told me that, I'm like, I really like that. I like the name of that. That's the thing. And honestly, that even relates to us as leaders. Like, as a leader, do we have the courage to speak up and stop just doing the status quo, to do more, to push back against our bosses? Do we allow our teams to have courage, right? Do we reward our teams when they speak up and bring these ideas, or do we just shut them down? Are we creating psychological safety for our teams to speak up and bring these ideas? So it's like that idea of courage was really critical. And so that's the thing that we teach the most at my company, is we're focused on, we refer to it as courage and training around courage.
And that makes a lot of sense, given, especially because you're dealing with a very particular culture, right? And so there is while people are different and those types of things, there's certainly a little more generality, right? To be able to say, okay, we're probably more broadly dealing with this type of thing. So I think that's fantastic. And I really like that. I think it's very insightful, right? Because that is how that might play out in that culture. Thinking about the folks that you have, how much of your team is based here in the States, and how much of your team is based in the Philippines? Is it mostly operations here and development there, or what does that split look like?
Yeah, we have 5 or 6 employees in Kansas City,
Okay.
Which is mostly like business development, sales and marketing related, and then everything else is there. But
Yep.
I think this concept of courage, is a universal concept. It doesn't really matter where you are, and in most big companies, the problem is, as I alluded to earlier with software engineering, a lot of software developers are treated like cogs in the machine, and it really doesn't matter what country they live in; they're just treated that way. And it takes courage to stop the assembly line, right? And that's the thing. But that's the only way things are going to change, is for people to raise their hand and speak up and push back. Like, this is not a good idea. There's got to be a better way. And that takes courage at any company, anywhere.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I think where I was trying to go with it is, I think there are, any sort of concept like courage has aspects and elements to it, right? Things that are built into it, like sort of little sub ideas or sub characteristics of it. And I think calling it courage in one environment might be more appropriate and might touch on a few of those aspects that might be more ingrained. Whereas in another place, it might be, it might be something like, um, it might be one of those other aspects. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm communicating that very well. So I think that's where I was going with that. I 100% agree. And we might call it, say, empowerment, right? In another environment. And it has elements of courage, but it might be called something else. So yeah, but I agree with you. I think that giving people the opportunity to feel like they have the space to step into a thing, right, is really important. That is how we get the best ideas out of people.
And it comes back to creating ownership.
Yep.
As we've been talking through in this conversation that we haven't talked a lot about directly, but we talked about indirectly, was creating ownership in your team. And the only way you're going to create ownership in your team is trusting them, delegating to them, and them having the courage to step up and do this stuff, right? And lead within the team and collaborate. And that really takes creating a lot of trust in your team and the team members also having the courage to step up and do it.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to do it.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to do it, but you need a couple people on the team that will.
Yeah. How do you think differently about that, or have you thought differently about that between the roles as a CTO or CIO versus CEO? How has your thinking evolved around your responsibility in generating the safe space and the energy to make that sort of ownership happen? Has that evolved for you as you've been in different roles in the company?
Well, I think earlier in my career, I was always the bottleneck. I was always the person that was making all the decisions and doing a lot of the work. And I didn't trust and delegate near as well, right? And then at some point in time, probably 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago, it just come to this realization that the most productive thing I can do is make everybody else more productive. And the only way I'm going to keep my sanity and take a vacation and grow this business is to hire other people I can trust and delegate stuff to. And if they can do stuff 80% as good as I can, then it's a huge win. And I need to delegate the stuff to them. And, earlier in my career, that was hard. Like it was very much a control freak. I'm the dog on the bone trying to solve the hard problems. And I don't want to give up the bone. And, that was my company and the product. It was everything. Right. But when I became a CEO, it's like, okay, I've got to delegate all these things. I have a little different role. So yeah, I think it was just a long career journey of learning, like, the only way to scale is like, I've got to trust other people. I've got to delegate. I can't do all the things. I can't do it.
Yeah, no, that's entirely true and very hard to own sometimes when you are a person who maybe has some of the traits that we share, which is like, oh, I can just do the thing. It's easier for me to just do it, right? Like just go fast.
It's still hard.
It is still really hard.
It's still hard for me.
It is.
Like I sold my house and I'm moving. And even now it's like, okay, I could ask somebody else to pack this stuff or, clean up this thing or sweep this thing or do this. I still find myself doing it.
Yeah.
Like it's hard for me at some level to delegate some of these things. And maybe some of it is also the ADHD side of me that is looking for that dopamine and the win. It's like, I get the win because I can see I cleaned off that shelf and it makes me feel super good. Even though there are other things that have been way more useful of my time than cleaning off that shelf.
Sure.
But the ADHD part of me wants me to clean that shelf because it will make me feel good.
Yeah.
And I know that about myself and I still cannot overcome it.
Sometimes you just
right?
have to embrace the thing. That's for sure. I love that.
Yep.
I love that. That self-awareness is really, really good. One of the things that I kind of want to talk about last year is not only are you doing this in your own organization, your own business, but you're also involved with Redbud. And so I'd love to talk about that a little bit. And one of the things that I particularly am interested in, but feel free to drive me in another direction if that's where your brain wants to go. I think, we've talked about the fact that we're both in the Midwest. Neither of us is a sort of typical entrepreneur, that we don't live in those places. We don't necessarily, I don't look like the people who look, who typically get big dollars and those types of things. But what's interesting is that we know that the research bears out. And I think we both have, interestingly, in our careers from different perspectives, are trying to find those people who have had experiences that give them a little more grit and a little more hustle. Like I'm coming at from how do I help organizations hire for that, right, in their process?
Yeah.
And you're coming at it from like, how do I create an entire, group of give the power to a group of humans to think and do their work differently, and so that their communities and their families thrive. I think, we're kind of coming at those things a little bit differently, but from the same purpose. And so I'm curious because Rosebud VC, I know, really believes in the notion that people, they really base their selection of founders around folks who have been strengthened by the struggle, right? I think is how they talk about that. And I'd love to understand, A, if that was a part of what drew you to them, to work with them, but B, how does that play out? And how do you take some of these concepts around ownership and that friction is good and apply that in the work that you're doing there?
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to say I agree with that sense of grit. And I think a lot of successful startup founders have that sense of grit. And like, I was the same way. I was a product of a one night stand, born in a trailer park in Oklahoma, worked with my dad every single weekend at a flea market. Like, hard work
Mhm.
and stuff was my DNA. Like, if I wanted new clothes for school when I was in high school, my uncle bought them for me. I mean, I shared a bunk bed with my dad and lived at my grandma's house when I was younger. Like, I came from nothing. But I was very hardworking and I was smart. I was lucky to have the genetics to be a pretty smart guy, a good problem solver,
Yeah.
but had the work ethic, had the grit. And I think that's really important. I've got a 16-year-old that doesn't seem to have it. And it's hard to look at him today and be like, man, I don't know, could he do the same kind of things I did? Like, things are hard for him. He just gives up.
It's interesting, right? Like, and you hear folks who are on the sort of other side of, well, for them, it's probably not the other side. It's just how life works. But from the outside, it's maybe, oh, you've been through this thing. You're kind of on the other side of it. But the reality is, like, you always have that, like, I have to hustle. I need to, I'm going to keep driving. There is that sort of innate in you. If it's going to happen, I'm going to have to make it happen. Right. I had my first paper route job that I got paid for when I was 8 and never stopped working and have been working ever since. So I understand and appreciate that. And so how does that play out in the work when you're thinking about Rosebud and the organizations how do you help translate those things are coming along with perhaps the founder that you're working with? How do you help hone that or shape it or sort of focus that for them? What advice do you give to them to be able to harness that in such a way that it's not just part of who they are, but it's one of the things that helps drive them and that they turn into a superpower rather than just a part of the DNA?
I think the way I would describe it might be a little differently. What I like to see in founders is people that are just willing to take ownership and figure out what needs to be done, versus they think there's always somebody to hire, or this person, I can pay this person, I can hire this consultant, I can spend more money, I can do this. Because, as a founder, you have the vision for something and you have the grit and the drive to go do it. And even if you throw big money at somebody else to come in, like a product manager, you can't, if you don't have a very good product vision and intuition about how to build a product, you're not going to hire somebody else and they're going to magically come in and just figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to figure it. If you can't figure it out and you were the one who started this crazy idea, they're not going to figure it out. Right. And so it's so difficult, I feel like, at any kind of startup founder, like even at full scale today, it's like, okay, how do we generate leads? How do we build a better sales and marketing system and stuff like that? Like, nobody else seems to be able to figure that out either. At some point in time, it's like, I have to be able to get my hands really dirty and go figure it out and go solve the hard problems. And if you forever think that you're going to delegate all of these things, a lot of times I just think it's going to work. Like, because you have the intuition, you're the one that has the most risk and reward to figure these things out. And just, acknowledging that is the case and you have to take ownership of all this and figure it out, I think is part of the key.
Yeah, I think that's great.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Thank you. All right. So we're sort of at the end of the official thing. So I have 2 last questions for you. One is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, and or something that you'd like to leave us with as a parting thought or piece of advice?
Something people ask me a lot about is, what is it like to sell your baby, or what is it like to have a big exit and sell your company? I sold my first company for $150 million at 29 years old. And, I didn't own all of it, but, I was the largest shareholder and we didn't have any investors. And, that was a life-changing event for me. But what's interesting is now 15 years later, like a lot of other people, I don't think it really changed my life very much. If anything, I think it made my life worse and more complicated. I mentioned I'm selling my house. I'm selling the house I bought 15 years ago to buy a much simpler, smaller house. I've sold all the toys, all the things I bought, a lot of the stuff. I've gotten rid of all of it. And the reason I tell this part of the story is, like, happiness is not based on the things you buy and acquire. And for me, like happiness, like the most important key to happiness for me was having the right spouse. It's
Yes.
like getting remarried and just finding your own happiness in your life. And it's not in from the things that you bought. People always want what they don't have. They're like, I want to go buy a pool table or a hot tub or whatever, a car or whatever the thing is. But then once you have that thing, like 6 months go by, you don't even care about that thing anymore. You want the next thing. Like that's just the way life is. And I guess I've been through so much of that for the last 15 years where I could have did most of whatever I wanted to do that I just realized I didn't care about any of it. And the thing I cared about the most actually was the work that I do. I enjoy the work that I do. I enjoy my job. I enjoy my purpose in life. And I guess that's my final point of this is like, it's about finding your purpose in life and the thing that really makes you happy that you get to do every day, because it's not really about the crap that you buy. Like that just adds more stress and crap in your life.
Yeah. And
you got to enjoy your purpose, your key purpose in life.
more things you have to take off the shelf when it comes time to move, right?
Yeah. And then you realize you're selling all of it on Facebook Marketplace and getting almost nothing for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that, Matt. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I appreciate you leaving us with that as a good reminder. So thank you. Lastly is, how can people listening to this be helpful to you? Obviously, we'll put a link to the book for people to be able to get into that and your podcast. But what would be helpful to you?
You can definitely check out productdriven.com. I have a newsletter and a book. And if anybody wants a free copy of the book, you can reach out to me. I may even send you a free copy of the book. It's not very expensive on Amazon. I'm not trying to make money selling the book. I genuinely want to help people. I think it's a great leadership book for companies that are struggling with leadership stuff. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a huge following on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn every day, and you find me on other socials and stuff. But yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been a
thank
great
you.
conversation. Okay. There you have it. Another great conversation. I'm so grateful to Matt for how he showed up with such authenticity, just owning who he is, sharing his strengths and his, like, both sides of the coin of the superpowers, and so evident in how he works and how he shows up. So really, really grateful for that. That's what I crave, in that connection and conversation. So thank you, Matt. I love the directness and the just no fluff. I appreciate that so much. I love his passion for what he's doing, and that it's so evident in the joy that he gets from the work that he does. So there's a lot in there. There were a lot more we could have unpacked if we'd had another couple of hours. So I encourage you to check out his book, to listen to his podcast, to see what he's putting out in the world. He's just a really thoughtful human being doing really cool stuff. So learn from him if you can. We'll put his information down in the show notes. And as always, if you have questions for me or the team, or things that you want us to pass on to him and you don't want to reach out directly, you can reach out to us. We're happy to do that. So until the next time we speak, keep the human side up.